Hello and welcome back. I'm actually using my cell phone right now to take a video. And if you're like me and you have a cell phone, it's probably like a part of your body. It's one of the things that you probably carry with you all the time. If you're like me, you probably use your cell phone to grade some of your Canvas discussion posts or some of your other assignments. But one thing maybe we don't use our cell phone enough for is what I'm doing right now. As you can see on the screen here, I'm actually taking a video of me taking a video. So this particular video today is to talk about opportunities that are out there to create effective videos to use in our Canvas classes. So I want to take you just through some of the approaches that I use. And I should say before making this, or as I'm making this video, that as a warning, I consider myself a pretty high-level user in terms of some of the video stuff I do, also in terms of my audio stuff I do with some of my musical work. So I say this not because I don't want to intimidate anyone, I think, with the idea that you have to necessarily approach video in the way that I approach it. It's a hobby of mine, just like you might have a particular hobby. And the analogy I use is that I love cross-country skiing, and I'm a decent cross-country skier, skate skier, but I'm just an absolutely miserably bad downhill skier. And so for me, whenever I go downhill skiing, I'm always intimidated because living in Lake Tahoe, like everybody is really good up on the slopes, particularly locals. So for me, it's always intimidating because there's like a very high level of skill going into what's a fun activity. I want to say that then about video. So maybe if you're a really good skier, the way skiing is for you, video and audio is for me. So I'm constantly thinking about using the mirrored cameras I have available to me to create videos for my online classes, and also, of course, to do some of these instructional videos that I'm sharing with you here in my temporary role as DE coordinator. I really want to use this video today to say that regardless of your level of commitment or level of skill in terms of working with video, working with audio, you should make it an effort to try to create a few videos for your class. I don't assume that some of you don't have videos for your classes, and if you do, that's great, and you should share some of your techniques and approaches with me in our conversations here on YouTube. But if you haven't used video yet, I want to argue with you that it's one of the best opportunities out there to really create instructor presence with your students. There's a value to using multimedia, and I know we're inundated with multimedia, from our cell phones to our computers to our tablets and TVs and devices. I mean, it seems like on a daily basis we encounter memes and information and images and videos and streaming services and apps and everything else, like in such multitude that it probably drives us a little bit crazy. So one of the challenges with creating videos for our students is cutting through the clutter and noise, because students are very familiar with videos, but then because they're so familiar with them and because they encounter multimedia forms on a daily basis, as we all do, in a variety of forms and approaches and content, it's a challenge maybe sometimes for us to use videos as a way of effectively connecting with our students and creating better instructor presence. So what I'm going to do in this video today is to take you through some of the approaches that I use, again with the caveat that I'm not necessarily saying you have to approach it the way that I do. I'll talk about shooting videos, and I will discuss the range of opportunities out there, from everything as simple as your cell phone, as I was talking about here, including the very useful tools within your Canvas shell. So I'm looking at my current Social 104 class here, and one of the neat things is I can click on, if I'm on a content page, I can click on the very handy tool here, which is Record Upload Media. So this allows me to actually upload a video if I want, or even an audio file, or I can actually use the built-in system and my camera that is typically built into my computer, or if I'm working on a phone, and I guess we'd have to see to see which the availability of some of this on the Canvas mobile devices, but I can basically use the already available media tools here for audio or video to record my own video and immediately share that on my Canvas shell. And I'm suggesting to you that there are things available to you like your cell phone and your built-in recording tools in Canvas that give you opportunities. But I'll take you through the slew of possibilities out there. I'll talk about audio, I'll talk about video. I am one to use a lot of different microphones, and one of the tips I'm going to give you in this video, and I'm really going to say like this is maybe the #1 issue, is to seek out and to really work on better quality audio. I don't have a lot of scientific information for this, but I would suggest to you that if you record a lower quality video, and I think we're familiar with this, if you go to YouTube, sometimes you'll see people record things on their cell phones, and there's that whole technique where they have the camera facing the wrong way, and in some cases, and I even see this on professionally done TV shows, because of that, they have to do a little cropping on the image, and as a result, you know, it's maybe a little blurry, or the aspect ratio, the size of it, if you will, and how it appears on your screen isn't the best. Well, I think we're used to that a little bit. I want to argue in this video that the place to really strive for better quality is with your audio. One of my personal pet peeves on listening to webinars, if I do a lot of educational webinars, or if I hear videos that are maybe focused on education or just something that someone has recorded for a podcast. I spend a lot of time with my personal musical stuff on YouTube, which you can check out my YouTube channel if you care to do that. And I sometimes find that there's really low quality audio, particularly people recording things, and they maybe aren't using a good quality USB microphone like this one. And I'll talk about some of the opportunities available to you. This is, I think, a very good one. It runs about $100, and I'm not suggesting you necessarily have to break the bank, but you can even get a lavalier mic like the one I have here, and that is connected to my Blackmagic camera. This is like really cheap, between $15 and $20. I can actually use it with a adapter, and I probably should talk about adapters as well. I can use it with an adapter with my cell phone, plug it in there, and I have like really pretty good audio. So I think one of the things that happens when people create videos sometimes, content for the internet, for YouTube, is that they directly record audio off their computer or their handheld device. And we'll talk about some of the pitfalls of that, and one of the main things I want to suggest then is to really look for something that's a little higher level of quality, because in terms of engagement of the viewer, if your audio isn't good, I would argue with you that it could lead to almost immediate disengagement of the viewer with the content that you're trying to present to them. So I think I'll jump right now into my additional content. I'll take you through all the dynamics of creating audio and video approaches so that your students can maybe have a little more to work with in terms of your presence here in your DE Canvas shell at Lake Tahoe Community College. Okay, so let's jump into some context here, focusing on the value of video and multimedia in your DE class. Again, my goal in this video is to focus on techniques that allow you to develop multimedia in your class. I'll stress in this video that it's very important to focus on your own comfort zone and not trying to do everything at once, particularly if you're not familiar with shooting video or audio or some of the other techniques I'll be talking about in this video. So one thing certainly you can think about is using previously created multimedia. So I've evaluated a number of Canvas classes that have really good resources. Sometimes you're looking for that short video, you're teaching economics and you want a really short video on behavioral economics, and you feature a Dan Ariely TED Talk or something maybe really brief that is to the point and also very well done in terms of the quality, and it's provocative. And I mentioned TED Talks, not that they're always amazing, and some TED Talks certainly are not academically focused, but sometimes it's a great way to use external multimedia as a conversation starter for your online discussions or assignments and so forth. So that's a great option, and probably I'll loop back in on this in some of my future trainings on campus and virtually about Canvas shells and other teaching techniques. But this video really does focus on creating your own original media, whether in audio or video format, specifically as a means of personalization, connecting with your students, developing more instructor presence in your class, as well as delivering important disciplinary content through lectures and conversations that you can use to engage your students in the disciplines in which you're teaching. So I will start here talking about video and audio recordings. And these are some of the goals, and I just mentioned some of these. So certainly you can increase your instructor presence. By the way, check out my additional video on this very topic, which gets into some of those issues. You can also do some personalization. In some of my other videos, I've talked about the technique of doing an introduction that is more personal with your students, talking about your pets, talking about your passions in terms of hobbies, discussing something even outside of your discipline. It's a great way to connect with your students, to show a little humility, and to not be intimidating. It's something many of us do on our first day in a face-to-face class, where we try to present ourselves as down to earth as much as possible, because we realize that for any student entering a class, there's a certain degree of intimidation that comes with just meeting your professor and your other students and focusing on the subject matter of your class. So it's a great way to personalize your class. It also allows for better instructor-student interaction. And I always say, in a traditional face-to-face class, you're talking, you're doing this kind of thing, you're having a conversation with students, you're doing group discussions. In a DE class, you don't have those same opportunities, albeit you can have group work, you can have Skype, you can have forms of interaction in the class that mimic what you would do in a face-to-face class, but typically that's not the case. Typically, because we don't require our students to be there in a synchronous manner, which means face-to-face virtually at the same time, we do this because of the desire to have students take a class and to be flexible in terms of their work and family schedule. You know, it often doesn't come across as the same as a face-to-face class because it's not synchronous like a face-to-face class is. So that's why I think it's really important for us to develop audio and video means to do what's called create telepresence with our students. So we'll begin with audio. And audio is, I think, one way to present lecture content. Some of my colleagues out there may disagree with me, but I would argue that using multimedia as opposed to text, if I give you a handout or I send you an email, we're inundated with that form of information. And sometimes we often call that, I'm thinking of Marshall McLuhan, a more cold form of media where maybe the expressiveness is not as great. For example, in this video today, I can do hand gestures. I can alter my tone and my cadence and rhythm and intonation of how I speak. It's very hard to do that in a textual format. And we could debate this, and I've had, going back to my graduate level days, thinking about my PhD class in rhetoric and having conversations about these issues at a theoretical level. So I think there is some research and theoretical validity to the point that some of these media forms we're talking about today potentially could convey more evocative information, just in terms of the channels of delivery, the modes of rhetoric that we're talking about. Now, I'm not saying at the same time you can't do that in a textual format, and indeed if you have an OER, open educational resource in your class, you may indeed intend a lot of the communication of content in your DE class to be textual. That's certainly fine. But I would say mix it up a little bit, and audio and video are some ways to do that. So let's start with the discussion of audio. Now, one thing I'm going to say, whether you're doing a video that incorporates audio, of course, or you're just doing an audio like a podcast, really I'm going to focus on the value of good audio. So you'll notice today I'm mic'd up with a lavalier mic. I'm not really too worried about concealing that. But one of the things that is just irks me a little bit, being immersed in the world of audio, in video, doing musical recordings, I'm very particular about the quality of what I record. And I'm not saying you have to get so focused on that you lose sight of, say, the content. But there's a lot of bad audio that floats around. I sometimes sit on these webinars, and people very often will use just the internal microphone of their laptop or their desktop unit. Sometimes those can be very good, but the audio tends to sound very compressed. The frequencies of that audio, I would say, are not great as compared to using other microphones. And so I'm just going to really stress throughout this video that if you're doing anything with audio, really strive to do better audio, just because I think there's going to be better engagement with your students because they're going to respect you a little bit more. They're going to understand that there's some level of quality control that went into creating this. It's akin to doing your lecture materials. If you write some information on the board, or you give your students a handout, or something in the class that uses technology. Again, could be the whiteboard, could be an overhead, could be handouts, and there's a ton of typos. Or I remember being in classes as an undergrad back in the days, I'm dating myself, when we had the mimeograph machines, and they'd be really light or it'd be on yellow paper, and you're trying to read this thing and it's kind of handwritten. I even had instructors in college who, in cursive, like wrote out their syllabus last minute and ran it through the photocopier. It sends a message to the class that your concern is not so much with the quality of what you're presenting, and I think it's a bad way to start. Likewise, if we have really bad quality audio, if we have video that is pixelized and just doesn't look very good, that is sending a message to our students, perhaps unintentionally. So I'm really saying there's a value to having good audio. And I just mentioned, I'm calling this a talkover. You might participate in one of these webinars where basically a person has a PowerPoint on the screen, they share the screen with you, and they're just talking on top of their audio. Now, I would say that's a good opportunity. It's probably better than a static PowerPoint. If I send my students a static PowerPoint and say, please understand everything in this PowerPoint, that's great. There's content in there. I'm not saying you didn't put a lot of effort as a faculty member into creating that PowerPoint. But again, in terms of hot and cold media, I think the static PowerPoint doesn't have a lot of your, say, rhetorical charm to it. It doesn't have your nuance. It doesn't have your sensibility taking us through that information. I happen to be a jazz musician, and I play blues music with a group. And I would say from the musical world, if you are listening to a recording on headphones, you can appreciate that, but it's nothing like being in a club and hearing the musicians play, and just that improvisational approach, and just the newness of it, the fact that you're right there experiencing it. Likewise, I would say if you have a PowerPoint that is going to involve, say, you recording on top of it, or it's a webinar or something like this, that's better than a static PowerPoint. But I think you can up it a little bit more and even improve on what you're delivering to your students by going beyond, say, a PowerPoint that has you talking on top of it. Audio versus video. So I think video is better just in terms of making a connection with your students. But if you don't have time to do it, it can be very time consuming. I mean, these videos that I record for you, it involves a lot. It involves me sitting down. I don't do scripts, but I have typically a PowerPoint like this. I record it. I have to download my file. I run that into Final Cut Pro, the program I use to edit it. I have to do transitions. I have to do some cuts if I make a mistake. I have to incorporate this as a cutaway, do an edit there for each of these slides. It is rather time intensive. Whereas if you do an audio recording, start to finish, and maybe leave the mistakes in there, and I'll talk about this later, but the fact that the viewer or listener is often forgiving with us, if that's the case, then I would say start with audio first. But video is a good opportunity, I think, to shoot for that in the future. Going back to audio, one opportunity you have is to record inside Canvas itself, and I'll break away here to show you some of that just with one of my screen captures looking at this, so we'll break away for that right now. Okay, so one of the easiest things to do in Canvas to record your audio is to do it directly from a content page, and I'm going to show you something here in a second, and this is a potential issue if you're doing this on a Mac. Right now, I'm recording this on Safari. And I'll show you then what often happens to me because of the Flash plugin for audio. I'm going to go to a page, and you can just simply, as you would for any content, use this to create audio. And so I'm going to click on Record, Upload Media. And you're seeing exactly what I've discovered often happens here in Safari on a Mac operating system is this warning about flash requirement. One thing you can do for that I actually haven't had success in is go to Preferences under your menu at the top left corner here on Safari. And as long as this is registered as a plugin, theoretically it should work. Alas, in my case, it's not doing that. And so I mention this because I've had a lot of issues, and if you know, Flash is kind of a dying technology in terms of web plugins. So let's hope that gets changed. So my workaround for this, and I don't do a lot using this tool, I'm only doing this to show you, go to Chrome. And so I happen to have Chrome opened up here as well. I haven't had this issue happen in Chrome. If you're not working on a Mac, if you're working on a PC, different operating system, this could vary. So I'm not going to go a lot into different operating systems and browsers. The key is always to try to see if it, in that case, is a Flash issue. See if your Flash is enabled with the plugin under Preferences. If not, try a different browser. You can always usually work around this. So I'm in Chrome now, and I have no issues on a Mac. So again, I'll go to Record, Upload Media. And in this particular case, I don't really need a webcam, so I can do no video. And over here, I have some choices. And what I think I'll do, just for the purposes of showing you different audio, is I'll try some different sources here, record these, and then include it on the video. So the first one will be with the actual internal microphone. Okay, so I've switched the audio over, and what you're hearing is not the audio from my USB microphone, but this is the audio directly from the computer. As I've suggested before, one of the issues that often comes up is the quality of your microphone will, I think, have an impact on the media that you're creating. So once I'm happy with that, I can hit the finish button. And it will likely take a second usually to process this. But in the case of this, I'm going to hit save. And I can test the audio quality. And as you might guess, if you're not happy with the audio that you recorded, it's very easy just to delete this. What I could do, of course, is title my audio. It could be audio lecture of some sort. And this is very easy, right? And then I'll just hit save and publish. And then as I create a module, I could link this page in that module and have a lecture. So let's just say we want to delete that. And I will just show you the sample of the other audio. Once again, I don't need the webcam, so I will just go to my microphone, and this time I'll record it with my external microphone. It's the one, it's called the Yeti. It's by Blue Microphones, and it's the one that I show at the beginning of the video, my good quality USB microphone. So I'll record it this time. And you always get a countdown. And so I think, as you're seeing, compared to that last microphone, which is directly off the computer, I'm getting just a much better quality. And we won't get into all the reasons for this, but like with any fine piece of electronics, you know, the more you pay generally, it's not always the case, you get better frequency response. There are a slew of other issues related to the electronics in the device that gives you that higher quality versus a lower quality device. We're not going to save this, but we could hit save. And then also keep in mind, if you ever want to upload media, you can also do that here. And it would just ask you where your file is. You would hit upload, and it's another easy way to do it. There are certainly ways then I'm suggesting you could record it using the actual Canvas built-in page using this handy button. Or if you already have, say, on a cell phone, you could do some audio recording, use that, and then upload it as part of your lecture. So a lot of options there to think about. And so good opportunities to use the internal feature in Canvas to do some of your audio recording. Another opportunity would be to do audio inside another program. For example, PowerPoint allows you to do this, and we can break away for a conversation about that. And one of the cool things about just how much our everyday software has advanced over the years is that a lot of the programs that you have available to you also allow some degree of recording of media. So as an example, I have PowerPoint up here, and this is just to suggest that this could be another way you could approach things. So you can go to the Media tab, and it does allow you to upload movies and so forth, but in this case we could record audio. And so all we'd have to do is choose our device, what we want to record, and our input source. And once we do that, we would hit record. And essentially right now it's recording my voice. I could hit save then, and it will have that here available. So in a sense, it's like an annotation. It allows you then to annotate something, and you could use this for your class. You could then upload the PowerPoint, and it could have that annotation in there. Another thing you can do is if you go to File, you can save your PowerPoint as a movie, and it gives you movie options. And so you can customize it here. You can choose whether to loop it and so forth. You don't necessarily have to do all that. But this is another option. If you wanted to do that, you could save your PowerPoint file as a movie, and this would be a way then that you could basically create a typical PowerPoint, but add in some annotations from audio, and then as the student is playing that, they would be able to hear the annotations playing along. So again, it's a way to make your PowerPoint a little more interactive by incorporating audio. Another opportunity is to record something externally using an app or using a recorder, and we can talk about this a little bit here. Okay, so I'm doing another test here of audio, and this is an example of using an external app. In this case, I'm using an app for my iPhone called Voicethread. This is a free app, and I think it records very good quality audio. And so you can experiment with different apps out there depending on your phone, if you have Android or Mac OS on your phone, on your iPad, a tablet, really anything out there, you're going to be able to access a free app. And I would just generally say I don't think you need anything other than a free app with these voice record apps that you find on phones. You could certainly pay to have your ads removed or something like that, but as far as the features and what is available, you don't need a lot. Basically, you need an app like this. It's nice to have the VU, so it shows you the level, and if you go into the red, in this case, on this app, you would potentially be peaking your audio. You would hear some clips and distortion, and then if it were too low, then obviously that would be an issue as well in terms of uploading this and having it usable. There are some ways in post-production to increase the level and to do effects and to deal with some of the issues of audio that sometimes come up, excessive ambiance if you're recording in a room with people talking or whatever. But for a very basic approach, I think using an app like this sometimes can be a little bit better than going with that Canvas opportunity we looked at earlier, which allows you to upload, say, using the microphone on your computer or laptop. So another option out there, the only thing you have to do with this one, of course, is to take the audio after it's recorded on your phone, email it to yourself or put it in Google Drive or Dropbox, and then use that upload feature that I showed you previously to save it to your Canvas shell. So it's an option for you if you want to get, I think, a little better quality audio. And again, since you're hearing this is directly from the app that I recorded, along with some compression as it compresses it to an M4A file. So I think you could see it has fairly decent quality, and you could also use this in a traditional classroom setting. If you have a face-to-face class, record your lecture, and then if you have that same class that quarter or later in future quarters, you could use that audio recording of your lecture and give that to students in your DE class as well. So more options out there in terms of recording audio using an external device like an iPhone or Android phone. So again, a really good opportunity, I think, to use your phone or other apps or technologies out there to do some of this recording externally. If you plan to do that, just again, think about what works best for you. I have some audio apps on my phone that I really like. If I have to record something to transcribe it later, it's really easy to use, and therefore I don't have to spend a lot of time figuring out that app or program, and I can do it in a very easy way. There are also some really good external audio recorders you can buy, but to be quite honest, I think if you do it using your phone, and again, I would really recommend getting hold of a lavalier mic. depending on the phone that you're using, you may need, like with my iPhone I'm shooting right now, a very cheap adapter. It's like $6 or $7 on Amazon that converts basically the 1/4-inch jack into, say, the standard iPhone jack. I don't think it's called a Lightning or whatever it's called right now. It does that conversion. This microphone itself was very cheap on Amazon. You could get one between 15 and 20 bucks. And I'm really saying just having that close to your body doing that recording, it's a real advantage in terms of just the quality of the audio. It sounds more direct. Often if you're shooting it from the phone, like if I did that right now and I didn't have it going, and actually maybe I can, let me just do that. Okay, so this is just an example of the audio. I took out my adapter and my microphone, and you're hearing what that sounds like. So you see that, or hear rather, wrong sense, but you hear probably a little more distance, right? If I have, you know, a sound going from an air conditioner or a heater or some other device, or traffic if I'm recording outside my window, and that phone is closer to those sound sources, it's going to pick that up. And so I think it's an opportunity to really use the technology available to make things a little easier for us. So again, I think what I've emphasized in this video, I'm not trying to overwhelm you with like new technology or purchases and so forth. By the way, some of this may be available on campus here at LTCC. You can have a conversation with me and my new faculty chair of teaching and learning. You can also talk to Trevor Thomas. We might have some opportunities in the future to do both audio capture and video capture on campus. So hold that thought, and we'll definitely come back to this as an opportunity in the future. But again, I'm really trying to stress that do whatever falls within your comfort zone in terms of multimedia. Also, one opportunity is to use external audio that you record with your phone, with an app, with a lavalier mic, with a USB mic, and sync that with video. And there's some various reasons for doing that, and I think we'll save that for a future video because it's a more higher level conversation about technology. So let's jump to video now. And again, I want to argue that video is really, I think, a better form of media to use because it allows a little more presence with your students in your online class, because again, that could potentially be lacking just because of the fact that it's not a face-to-face physical class. I want to make the point that I think viewers are somewhat forgiving, maybe with video and probably with audio, even maybe disregarding what I said earlier about audio quality. And I say they're forgiving because we live in the world of YouTube, we live in the world of streaming apps and technologies and approaches out there that often involve people shooting things on their phones or GoPros, sometimes without stabilization. And if it's for action sports or something like this, viewers tend to be forgiving. There's a realization that you're not a professional cinematographer, filmmaker, and you're shooting things on the fly. And there's a certain value, I think, in our culture visually, and I teach a visual anthropology class, by the way, so I've actually studied this academically. There's a value to having some of that footage being the way it is and not looking so professional. You know, the funny thing is even guys like Steven Soderbergh, Academy Award-winning directors, are shooting entire movies on iPhones and handheld devices. So there's a value, I think, to using some of this. And I think viewers are generally forgiving, so I don't think the expectation in your mind should be that you have to do a super professional job in terms of your recordings initially, because it can be kind of intimidating with the technology and the time involved. We'll go through some different video scenarios in terms of maybe how you might want to approach video in your class. So one approach is very similar to what I mentioned with those PowerPoints Plus, sort of the PowerPoints Plus audio or plus video or some level of interactivity. So one opportunity is to use PowerPoint and to incorporate that, as I mentioned in that earlier video cutaway, which has opportunities to use audio to record on top of it. Basically, you're doing annotation on top of a cold form of media, a form of media that doesn't have a lot of presence to it or opportunities for more rhetorical engagement beyond the pure content itself of what's on the screen, the text, the images, and so forth. The same thing can be done with Voicethread. And I think Voicethread is an interesting technology. I'm not going to have a demo of that, but it's available for you inside Canvas. I've used it for my advanced instructional skills workshop I did, the training, where we piloted some of that. I think Voicethread is pretty good. I've seen some of my students use it. It basically is PowerPoint with a little more interactivity. So it has more the feel of transitions. You click on a button, and then that button pulls up some audio. Overall, I don't love Voicethread just personally. I don't think, to me the interface is a little clunky, and visually it doesn't look all that great. This is just my opinion. So I would really shoot for some more video opportunities out there in terms of media. But that's totally my opinion. It's totally subjective. Please differ with that and do your own thing. If you love Voicethread, that's great. The second thing is opportunities to use video through Canvas and or Webcam. So let me jump to a cutaway video here to show you some of what that looks like. Okay, so as I've mentioned previously in this video, one of the easiest ways to record either audio or video is to do so just within the Canvas app. So what you'd want to do is to go to your class, and I will just actually go to this DE resources page, and the key is you'll want to, if this comes up again, this is on a Mac, I'll have to try it in my office on a PC, allow it to use your microphone. So hit allow. Once you do that, you can go to record, upload media, and I will once again hit allow. And I'm just seeing my webcam is opening up, so I am indeed on screen. Now, one thing to note about this is if you're recording anything, and it's kind of nice here, you actually see the level of your audio, so that's good. You can also always adjust your camera as such, and that might be good if you're trying to get a different background. Now, one thing I read about recently with Skype, I believe it was, is that they have a new feature enabled such that you can blur your background. And why would that might be good is because, like in my case here, my office currently is fairly messy, and it's just like a personal thing. You may not care about this, but it's a personal thing just in terms of whether or not you want your background to look a certain way. It probably just depends on how particular you are in terms of having stuff behind you. You know, I actually in some cases have recorded videos using backdrop screens. There are other techniques you can use. One of the things you can do is find a neutral wall. If I had a big enough wall here of this particular color and I position that behind me, or I set my computer behind me, or I had a backdrop like that was pretty neutral, then that might look a little bit better. But again, it really is up to you in terms of your own interests and if you're concerned about things like that. So it's just one thing to think about. We can look at the webcam here, and it's just the choice. So in this case, it's going to be my camera that's just available on my desktop Mac. If I click on the mic, so in this case you probably won't have all these choices. So currently right now I'm using my desktop microphone. I could also use the internal microphone built into the computer, and this is actually my mixer that is set up. So you may not have all those choices on your end, but again, what's nice about using this interface is it's very easy to use. I choose my camera, I choose my mic, and I'm set to go. Like we saw before, if we click on upload media, it'll give us those same prompts. So that is pretty easy to operate. So we can do a test here. Let's hit start recording. It gives you a countdown. Okay, and this would be my video that I'm recording for my class. So this particular video could be a lecture, it could be a conversation with students, it could be an introduction to a module, and so forth. When I'm done with that, you'll notice on the right hand side it's giving me a timer showing me how long I've spoken, so you can keep track of that. It's continuing to give me the level here, and then I will hit finish. Okay, and then what I could do is play this. And if I'm satisfied with that, I would call it something. We'll call it test video 1, hit save. Now one thing I wanted to mention, and I should have mentioned this, when you record the video and you hit save, it could take a couple minutes for it to actually save. So just keep that in mind. And then once you have your video on the page, when you hit play, it should play it. And indeed, that is my video. So one of the things you'll notice is just because it is using my webcam, it's a little lower resolution, so you're getting this aliasing or pixelization here. This sometimes happens like if you have a even nice TV set, a 4K high definition, you sometimes will see, particularly like with night scenes on a movie, you'll see stuff like this. And again, it's not a huge deal, but it's just something that I happen to notice since I'm kind of particular about media and audio and video. So I think one of the things you see coming up here as an issue is just, and I mentioned that in the cutaway video, are you excited about using your webcam? There are limitations to computer webcams. The resolution is often not great. Sometimes the video can look really grainy. To me, it just feels like someone shot it in their office and it doesn't have that quality control focus I think is important. But if you're doing things on a budget, and I don't mean necessarily even a budget in terms of your money, but in terms of your time, it could be a good opportunity to get started with using the internal Canvas video recording app as well as your webcam, and I think you'll be good to go with that. Now, I should offer that one of the easiest ways to record a video, and this particularly would be a video that is more taking the student through your screen, showing them what's on the screen for the purpose of, say, navigating or understanding some content. And this is on a Mac, and that is to use the QuickTime player. And I'm actually using it right now to record, but I will try to show you this. And what you can simply do is search on your computer for the QuickTime player. This is on Mac, and it's 100% free, which is really great. Go to the file, and you have 3 choices. You can do a movie recording, an audio recording, or a screen recording. If you do a movie recording, this will be very familiar to you. And this takes us to our previous situation, basically, where, remember, we were in Canvas and we were actually doing the same thing, using the web computer, and we were saving it within Canvas. So this is allowing me to do that, but within the QuickTime player. Now, one of the things you're noticing, and this happens, I think, we can already begin to see here, just the color here I was mentioning in this video as well about pixelization and aliasing and so forth. You also notice that I'm getting a really bright hue on my hands and on my face, and so that's presumably because I'm using the camera's web recorder. I could do some stuff with lighting if I wanted to do that, but it may not be the best thing. So one thing you can do is you could sit back a little bit, you could move somewhere else. It's always a hassle. If you wear glasses, you always get a little bit of reflection if you have any light source in the room, and that's one of the things, right, with really great photographers is they're able to compensate for things like that. So this would be the same thing. Now, would there be an advantage to doing it this way and then saving it to YouTube and then putting a link onto Canvas? Probably not. You know, it seems to me that if you're going to go this route, I would just recommend using the native Canvas version of the same tool. But I wanted to show it because it is on QuickTime Player. Now, again, you could do audio recording, and that will allow you to do the same thing, make an audio recording that is just a sound file. This one is great out here because I'm actually currently doing what it is that you're watching. So it's a screen recording. When it loads up, it has a choice. You select your microphone, and then you basically select a section of the screen that you want to record. So just make sure, if you're not doing anything in post-production, if you're not planning on editing your video in any software system, just make sure then that you have it cropped nicely, because you have no ability, if you're not doing any post-production editing, to get it to look nice. So that's just one thing to think about potentially. But again, using the QuickTime player I think is really easy, it's convenient, and one of the best uses for it is to do the screen recording. Now, 3 is using an external camera, specifically a phone. I am shooting this right now on my iPhone, and I have to say, when I transition to an iPhone, and I do a lot of research videos if you check out my YouTube channel, I love the convenience of using a phone, an iPhone, an Android device, a Samsung, whatever you have, because the quality is pretty darn good. Again, if Soderbergh can shoot movies on it, you can probably shoot your class videos on it. It's convenient. It's right there. If you get an idea, you can pop out your phone, you can do a quick recording, even without an external mic, and you often can get some very good material. If you want to do something on location, the phone is a great opportunity to use what is available to you to create some media, not spend a lot of time or buy anything new. I just ordered a new device called the Pivo that I hope to use with some of the upcoming webcams I'm going to be shooting, or not webcams, but webcasts through YouTube I'll be shooting through my new faculty chair of teaching and learning. And this particular device will actually pivot as the speaker is talking, and you can then allow for some more interactive video that you create. So I'll let you know how that goes, and you'll actually see some of that in action once I start launching these seminars, these brown bags that will be simulcast via the internet so you can watch at home. So you can see some of that next year. So I really do recommend the phone. I think the phone is a great opportunity to capture some video that you otherwise wouldn't be able to capture, say, in the past, because you didn't have that technology available to you. Okay, next we could talk about using an external camera to do some of the video shoots. And so let me cut away to another video I shot in my home office talking about some of that equipment. Okay, so in this section of the video, I'm going over a level of approach to a video that maybe you don't want to get into. It just really depends on you, and if you want to take this on as a hobby, or if you already have, say, a nice camera, a DSLR out there, like a Nikon, a Canon, a Panasonic, and you can actually use that camera and its memory card to record really super high quality videos, 1080p or 4K, and there are even cameras now that are going beyond 4K. There are also some options out there that I think are low-cost options if you don't want to go into that $1,000 plus price mark, because when you get into using a DSLR or a high-end video camera, you probably get the bug of buying lenses for the camera and then other accessories and so forth. So it is kind of a slippery slope in terms of, if you get into it, you may decide that it's breaking the bank a little bit. One thing that is probably easy to do initially if you are going to use a camera, and if you're using an iPhone, I'm shooting this video on the iPhone so I can show you some of the other cameras, but one thing to get is a tripod. With the iPhone, I have a pretty good adapter I'm using right now that just screws onto a typical thread on your tripod. And in this case, I'm actually using a microphone stand and a different adapter. But it's very good to get a tripod of some sort. This one's a pretty good one, the Manfrotto, and it has a nice head. You know, if you look at a catalog like B&H, you could spend like $1,000 on a tripod, but you could get certainly a very good one for 30, 40, 50 bucks. That is just sturdy, that is adjustable, that has a nice head if you want to do some panning and tilting of your camera. It's pretty nice, and it is not cheaply made. As a result, you're going to get very solid video. It's not going to be shaky. You could set one of these up. I've done this in many classes in a classroom, and just hit start, and that's it, and you capture your footage. So this is one option, certainly. You could also get smaller tripods. They're pretty flimsy. Like this one is not great at all, and the advantage is it extends, but it's just not very good at all. I do not recommend some of these. You can get some of these for like, you know, 10 bucks on Amazon or at Best Buy or Target or whatever, but you're getting what you pay for. So this is a good solution if you want to set up something very quickly. You could also get something like this, which allows you to set a camera on the table. You can also attach it to something, and you could shoot from different angles. Obviously, a DSLR, this is not going to work with that. If it's a heavy camera, it would make no sense to even use this. This we're talking about for something like a GoPro that is much smaller and lighter, or something like the Osmo Pocket, which would allow you to attach it to that. And it's very convenient just to pop this in, set it up in your class, and then you're really good to go. So over the years, I've actually experimented with a lot of different cameras, and I have a few YouTube videos that talk about my experiences using different cameras on the Las Vegas Strip, which is where I do a lot of research and I do footage there. In this particular video, I was talking about using the different technologies, the different cameras, the advantages, the disadvantages of the cameras, and what they allowed me to capture in terms of footage. And I was just showing an example here on Fremont Street using a stabilizer for a GoPro to see what kind of footage I could achieve. And it's, you know, kind of fun doing some of this. I've also shot food videos using tracks that allow me to get a perspective, in this case a time lapse, and it allows for a certain effect. As you can tell, it's basically a track where the camera's moving, and it allows you to just get a different type of footage. And this is some additional video I shot on the Strip. And this particular footage comes from my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, which allows me to shoot in what's called RAW on my memory card. It also allows me to do a lot in post-production, and you can tell an example of it here. What happens is, let me blow this up for you and take, so this is the footage it actually shoots. As you can see, it's very flat video, and this is intentional because what you want to be able to do in post-production, using, say, a color grading program like DaVinci Pro or doing it in Final Cut Pro, you want to be able to take that, and I'm going to show you the difference now, applying what's called a LUT. It's called a lookup table. And this allows you to take footage from your camera, very specific to your camera, and give it a certain look. You can see, maybe notice this, that this looks more like film, and that's one of the reasons I ended up investing in the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. It doesn't do still photography. Their latest version of the camera actually does. It just does video. So for me, it's a one-stop shop for all things video. So I actually have that and use it because I really like the ability to customize my footage after the fact. So it's fun to work with all these cameras, but as I said, it is a slippery slope. So one of the things when I got this camera was I figured out that I needed a small LCD screen, because if I was shooting a video and I wanted to make sure my subject was in frame, if it was me or another subject, I realized I needed this because it gave me the opportunity. There's a bracket that goes on the top of this to really see if I'm framing my subject. So obviously it's another expense, and then that requires a battery. So it does start to add up if you're getting into levels of like sophistication that allow you to do much more with your footage. I really like using custom lenses, so I have different lenses for different subjects or opportunities. I have a macro lens, which I don't have here. I also recently got into using vintage lenses. So this is a really old Minolta lens that I got pretty cheap on eBay. And when I shoot it, I get a much different look in terms of the stock, in terms of the footage. Also, a lens like this, which is a Meteor. It's an old Russian lens that was used for these old movie cameras. It's a pretty interesting lens. It's tricky to use. I actually had to buy, I got the lens I think from Russia and on eBay, and the adapter from the Ukraine, and it's really tricky to use. You get some challenging issues with your footage, creating a vignette effect sometimes on the side of your video that you shoot, so you have to often crop it in post-production. But kind of fun to work with for different applications. If I'm shooting music videos, I sometimes will use a different lens to give a different look in terms of the quality of the footage, the color, and so forth. You might also end up getting into something like getting a LCD light. This is just a cheap battery one. This mounts on a tripod or a microphone stand. And then if I'm shooting a particular video and I have a light issue with the subject, like if I'm doing a video for myself, I might want to adjust the light. As you're getting here, like you start to get into levels of nuance and subtlety with your videos, so you have to really think if you want to go this route. I don't think you necessarily have to go the route. If you go the DSLR route or something like a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, then you're getting into lenses and what lenses to buy and other features and memory cards and things for your tripods and so forth. You could do something very simple like use a GoPro, and I've done this in some previous videos that I've shot, I've used actually the GoPro, and I find that it was not my favorite camera to use. I still have mine, but it has a near 180-degree angle, so you get almost like a fisheye effect, and that's intentional because if people are shooting action sports videos, they want to have a really wide perspective. Like if they're mountain biking, you could see everything around you almost 180 degrees. There are filters you can use on something like a GoPro to reduce the fisheye effect, but it's not the best camera I found for recording, say, class lectures. There are some new ones out there. This is one called the DJI Osmo Pocket Pro, and it is pretty amazing. Everything is built into the camera here in a very small size, and it actually has a built-in stabilizer. So as you're moving your camera, taking footage, it's giving you the XY axis support such that you're not going to get as shaky footage. It's pretty cool and innovative. It records everything to the camera, and then you can download it, and it actually, with this little device here, attaches to a phone, so you can also use it in combination with an iPhone, or I believe an Android. So kind of cool, and this one might be one that you could use for both class lectures and also if you're doing stuff for fun on the side, because it has the built-in stabilizer. So again, it's an option I think to think about if you want to get into this as a hobby beyond doing stuff for your class. Really, the sky is the limit. My recommendation with any of this stuff is to set your own limits and decide on what you want to do if you want to go this route. Again, I think one of the best routes out there, if you have a DSLR or if you plan to get one, you can use it when you're on vacation, for trips. It takes amazing video, and it doesn't take that much work to take that footage from your memory card, put it in your computer, and do some entry-level editing in terms of software, even apps, and then get that up on YouTube. So that would be my recommendation, is that if you're definitely interested in still photography or using it outside of a class setting, it probably makes sense to invest in something like a DSLR. Again, an iPhone, an Android phone also takes really great video and photography, still photography, so it's also a great option for you to think about as well. So just some tips today if you're thinking about going the route of looking at some sort of external camera to shoot your video for your DE class. So again, if you get involved in using that equipment, there obviously is a cost associated with it. For me, it's a passion. It's something I enjoy doing on the side as a hobby. So I just love making videos, maybe as you can tell. So I like experimenting with different technologies. I like using different cameras. Every camera, every lens I use, if I have opportunities to switch out lenses, have different features to them, have different lux. When I do color grading in my programs on the computer, I can really fine-tune the footage. For a lot of people out there, that may be well beyond your interest level, your technology desires, or your time desires, and so forth. So really make that decision. But I want to say there are some really great, as I offered in my cutaway video, external cameras out there that you can really utilize. I think that do some amazing things in terms of footage and audio quality and so forth. So consider that. Again, like I said earlier, if you're shooting video, please try to approach it with an approach to using good audio. It's so cheap to get an external microphone. It is okay to use your built-in microphone on your computer, but just like the built-in web camera, there are limitations there in terms of the frequency response, just in terms of the air, the distance maybe that's traveled as you're picking up the sound from your microphone, and that's going to your device, recording it, whatever that is. So really try to strive for good audio when you shoot your video. I mentioned earlier, in the future, there may be opportunities for doing more recording on campus, in some of our offices. A few full-time faculty have asked me about doing video shoots in the university center with some of the capture technologies there. I haven't heard back yet on the availability of those spaces, but I'll try to put that on my list of priorities to look into for next year to see if you're on campus, if this would be an option for you. Again, if you're off campus, if you're teaching for us online or ISP, and you're not here on campus, that's not going to help you. So I think I can do some more trainings for you to help you virtually to see what might meet your needs in terms of video and audio. I've mentioned throughout this video, really focus on your level of comfort. I think there's an opportunity there to use some new technologies to push yourself, to try some new forms of immersive media that you can use to connect with your students to create better instructor presence in your online class, but don't go overboard initially. I think a good goal is to start with a couple videos in your class and then build up over time, because there is a time commitment to this. Use what you need, but use something. I think the days of teaching a static, cold media online class where you have a discussion board, it's textually based, you have a couple photos, you have some PowerPoints and some exams, those days frankly are over. I just don't think that works anymore. Our students are tech savvy. Our students are immersing themselves in YouTube, in Instagram, and all forms of immersive chat programs and apps through the internet, through their social media. So I don't think it works anymore to have a very static, cold class that is just a bunch of text and typing. It just frankly doesn't deliver what could be delivered in terms of some of the telepresence and rhetorical opportunities using newer media as opposed to textual based media. So it's my opinion on this, but I would say there is some theoretical literature out there and some research that would back me up on this. And if you want to have those conversations again, come by my office, or we can chat through Skype and so forth and have some of those conversations. So let's talk a little bit about pulling this all together and getting a final product that we can use to give to our students in Canvas. And I created this chart. I was trying to basically work through what are the different levels of video, audio, some other opportunities for doing more advanced focus of graphics, editing your videos, and then hosting your videos. And what I've done in this chart, I've given you 3 columns: entry level, mid-level, and advanced. And I can just go through these with you. So to go through video, entry-level video is using your webcam. Mid-level is maybe using a phone or a GoPro. Advanced would be higher level cameras, tripods, exchangeable lenses, and so forth. With audio, entry level is computer and phone based. Mid-level, I would say, is focusing a little more on good quality audio, such as a lavalier microphone. And then advanced audio is post-production editing. One of the things I do a lot in my speeches I give, and I notice this if I'm doing like one take and I'm not doing any edits, I do a lot of ums or audio peaks. As I raise my voice, right, I mean, the audio is going to peak. One of the things I can do in post-production is visual. I can look at some of this. I can see where my peaks are. I can lower the decibels, the dBs of that audio a little bit and correct that. I can actually go in and take out ums, and ums are something that have a particular look as a waveform in my audio, so I can quickly see those. I can do a quick splice, and I'll show you maybe here in my video, and then I can then almost just, there might be a glitch in the video, so maybe I do a dissolve transition, or if I do a cutaway, I can just do that edit, and then you're not even going to notice it in terms of the audio that you hear as a viewer or a listener. But that's pretty high level. Again, it involves time. If you want to get it perfect, you can almost kill yourself being so anal retentive, as I often get with audio and video, that sometimes you have to let that go and just say, I don't want to take that advanced route. But there is an option there in terms of audio. Titles and graphics. If you're entry level, it's probably there isn't any titles or any extra graphics, or you're doing it at the level of the file. So in other words, you title your file Social 101 lecture and you put that up on YouTube, or you host that on Canvas, and that's about it. There aren't any graphics or titles in addition to that. Probably in the mid-level there would be something, a few here and there. The advanced level would be complex titles, motion graphics, stock footage, and so forth. I like having graphics pop up because I think it gives me an opportunity to do something a little bit different and more interactive with my videos. But again, it's totally based on your preference, your level of comfort. If you don't want to do that, I totally get it, so don't push yourself too much. In terms of editing, entry level, you're not really going to edit. You're not going to have opportunities to do that. So mistakes happen. You have ums in your video, or you mess something up, you have to correct yourself. Again, I think most viewers are pretty forgiving in terms of that technology, and they don't expect you to have high-level editing. A mid-level, I would say there's an entry-level program or app. For example, if we look at what you can do with Camtasia, and I can jump to that real quick here. Now, Camtasia, unfortunately, is not free. And so if you want to use something like Camtasia, you would have to pay for it. The nice thing about it is that it allows you to do some fairly sophisticated things. You can do animations, cursor effects, voice narration, audio effects, visual effects, gestures, transitions, annotations, and incorporating media or uploading media. So it's kind of nice. I mean, it's pretty sophisticated program. One thing that you likely will do is create a recording. And a recording then will give you some options. You could use the internal camera, you could choose your microphone, system audio, and then you choose the size of this. And so what happens with this is you're basically trying to figure out where you want the image or the video to record, and you can actually see that. So it makes a green line showing you exactly what will be recorded. Anything outside of that green line will not be recorded. So Camtasia is, I think, really good for doing the screen captures, also for doing other recordings as well. And then you do have some options once you actually get into the program and work in your media area to do some sophisticated things. And so it might be a nice thing to use if you wanted to do things like adding some titles to your video, if you want to do annotations or transitions. So it's an option there certainly if you'd like to get a little more sophisticated. Again, it's not a free program, but it's one I think that is very good and offers you a lot of opportunities to do some creative things with media. So with a program like that, you can add graphics, you can do some transitions. Again, it does involve some level of purchasing. We don't license a lot of these programs for our faculty, so I don't want to say you're on your own, but I wouldn't expect that if you have an idea to use software that the institution will support it. And the simple reason for that is a lot of these programs are very expensive to do site licenses, upwards in the thousands of dollars. It's very hard for us to do this, to put on everyone's computer. As a result, I would basically say if you're looking for new software, unless you want to purchase that on your own, use some of the software that is available to you. One that is free if you use Mac is iMovie, which we can look at real quick here. Now, one additional option, and this is a Mac option, is you could use iMovie. And the best way to do this is go to your App Store app on your computer and click install. I actually don't have iMovie on the computer, but it was my first program I used ages ago that really got me interested in doing higher level media. And now I use Final Cut Pro for everything that I do in terms of movies and music and so forth. And again, iMovie gives you some of this without some of the bells and whistles of more complex editing programs. An example of that is a nonlinear editing program, and that's Final Cut Pro. And I use that to do all these videos. I find like it's really great for what I want to do. And you can use the features that you want to use, kind of like with Canvas. Okay, actually I wanted to break away for just a bit to talk a little bit more about the idea of using a program for editing your video in case you decide to go to this level. So I'm just going to focus on the basics here. You can get in really deep, obviously, like with anything, with any technology, if you choose to use a program or an app out there to do some basic editing. So I'm just focusing on the basics here. And I'm suggesting here this is an ability to not have to use that single video take as your only or final version of a class video or an informational video. The analogy might be similar to if you're writing a short story or a poem, and imagine if you wrote a first draft of that, and then that first draft you could never edit that piece of writing. That first draft is published or becomes your final work. It almost seems laughable to think about that. So a challenge, I think, of using one take that you shoot in your class or in your office is that sometimes you do make mistakes. As I've said throughout this video, I think viewers are generally forgiving. If you set a camera up in your class and you record a lecture from start to finish, it's going to have that same spontaneity that a lecture has when you provide that live in your class but don't record it. So I don't think necessarily that you would have to do something sophisticated in terms of editing, but here's what you might do in case that is a direction you want to go in. So titles, and this would be allowing you to name your video and also to define sections of the video. When I do editing, I work in Final Cut Pro. You can see here on the screen. And what I sometimes want to do is to have at the beginning of a screen a title, and I might actually have like a logo as well, in this case the Coyotes logo. And then I might want titles other places in a particular video, and I could probably find one with a better example. In fact, this video I'm working on right now, which is called The Value of Video, I'm engaged in this very process. And so what I might want is for each section of the video, like when I'm talking about using an external camera, I might want a title to appear right there, so as a viewer it's a little easier to understand what you're watching. And I might also want a title at the beginning of my video, and perhaps if I want to do something at the end with some information, I might want that there. Again, YouTube will do this for you. So YouTube is probably the easiest thing out there that I've seen that will allow you to do some simple titles and even some edits. And as I just mentioned, you might also want to decide where to start and stop your video. I think you could, if you want to start with just the basics, if you record a video and you maybe want to cut out some stuff you say at the beginning or at the end and just have one take that's 5 or 10 minutes long or something like that, that's fine. Again, if you get into using software to do this, it becomes quite nice. So as you can see in a video like this one, if I make a mistake at some point or I don't want to include a certain thing, I typically will have a tool within my program. This is called the Blade tool, and then it allows me to cut a video at that point, and then I can cut it at another point, delete that. Now at that moment when I do that, you just introduced another technology or issue you might want to address, and that is if you do a cut in a video from one point to a next and you don't fill in that space, essentially, it's going to be very jittery. There's going to be something that the viewer will notice in terms of you speaking, and all of a sudden it cuts to something else. So one way around that is to do transitions. You can do things like cross dissolves at a point in the video, and then that allows you to have a smoother point moving from one section of the video to another that typically do not connect in a natural way. So that's another thing that you get into when you start thinking about wanting to really customize your video. And in this video I'm shooting right now, I'm doing a lot of that, as you're noticing, because I'm jumping from one program to the next, and I maybe don't want you to see those moments in between. So again, it gets into levels of nuance if you're willing to go there, levels of subtlety. And as I mentioned, the transitions and create flow between your video clips. Sound is another aspect, and this allows you to adjust your narration in terms of inconsistencies in your sound and adding incidental music. Some of this, by the way, you can do in YouTube. YouTube has royalty-free music, and you want to make sure, like, I think sometimes people think they go to their YouTube, and if they have a channel, they put some music up there and it's maybe, you know, a track of the Foo Fighters. Well, YouTube has very sophisticated algorithms, and if you do that, you're going to get a takedown notice. You're going to get a notice in some cases that someone will want to monetize your video to allow you to keep their copyrighted music there. If it's from a big artist, it's never going to fly, and YouTube will definitely spot that. I've actually had situations where I've recorded my own music, and maybe it's the sample library I'm using with my musical software, but I've actually gotten notices and I literally created it from scratch. So it's kind of strange sometimes that this happens with YouTube. But if I want to, I could, you know, adjust the sound. If my narration is too loud, I can adjust the dBs or decibels, move it up or down to get it more consistent. This can be very, very time consuming, as you might guess. So sometimes I let things go and I try not to be a total perfectionist with sound. As well, I might add my own music to a video, record that, and then that gives me an intro or outro splash video, basically, that is maybe in this case like a title screen. Again, you don't have to do that. The level of like sophistication involved in some of these areas can be rather intense, so just you have to think about that if you want it or not. What I would suggest instead of maybe even thinking about music or like sound effects or Foley stuff is to have just really good quality audio, which gets more into what microphone you're using to record your lecture or your instructional video, whatever it happens to be. Now, files, once you have your video, you often will download this to your computer. If it's the case of a DSLR, and I'll talk about this later in the video, you typically will have a card, and then that card gets inserted in your computer. You save that file, and then if you're going to edit that file, that's what you'd bring into your video software. And then you would take that and probably further render it, save that file to a format, and then upload that to YouTube. So it's the file level involves downloading your video and then hosting it, which we'll probably get into in a later instructional video. So advanced techniques, I would say, is just that level of getting fancy with your videos, doing some things that are above and beyond what is typical. So in the case of Final Cut Pro, as an example, I can do some sophisticated things. I could go in and take my video and find a filter of some sort. And you don't necessarily have to do this. I mean, some of these are quite corny, where you could see it's adjusting the look of the color. And, you know, a lot of these would be like, this would be super distracting. Adding artifacts to your video or something like this. Probably not so useful. But what I'm trying to suggest to you is that you can go in and really customize your video as you like it and get it looking in a fairly professional sense. I think that will add maybe to the appeal of your video as your students and other people, if you have a YouTube channel, are watching it. You don't have to do that initially. Again, I'm suggesting stick with the basics. Now, there are other options out there, and some of these could be involving a subscription price, and as an example, I'll take you to the internet. So there are sites like Doodly, and Doodly basically will allow you to do a lot of customization with very little effort on your end, and that's an example. The college uses Powtoons, and Powtoons allows you to do explanation videos. It will have animation, it'll have like hands that appear on the screen, and the only thing you have to do is type some things in on your keyboard and add some images if you want to do that, or use some of their customized templates. It's super, super, super easy to use. The other thing you can do is, if you have an Android or iPhone, you can go to their respective app stores and download and try some video apps that would allow you to do some editing as well. That could be maybe the easiest approach to take, or one of these approaches, which involves using some preset templates. So again, those are some options to think about if you want to use some software on your end to do some editing for your videos for your DE classes. And you can really use the features you want on there. You don't have to use some of the advanced features if you don't want to get into that. Lastly, we can talk about hosting. So entry level, I think, as I've shown in the demo cutaway videos, you can use Canvas and it's perfectly fine. It'll host your media. And most Canvas sites, I can't tell you the number offhand, but it's quite a few gigabytes of space allotted to you. If you ever run into issues with that, I believe you can contact me here in Spring Quarter, moving forward, Trevor Thomas, our DE coordinator, and I think we can allocate more space for that. I don't think it's come up in the past. Generally, it's enough space for people in terms of our allocation for storage of videos. If you want to go mid-level, I would say YouTube is a great opportunity there. I use YouTube. I love it. I have over 1,000 videos on YouTube, and I just crossed a few thresholds. One of these was a threshold of having 1,000 subscribers, and that allows me to do community posts. And another one, I recently had a video that hit 50,000 viewers. So that was kind of a couple firsts there. So either mid-level or advanced. And the advantage of YouTube is that it is really handy just in terms of hosting. You can actually do some things in YouTube. I won't show you in this video, but you can do some simple titles. You can add some license-free audio. You can do some other bells and whistles on there very easily and quickly. And in some ways, I would recommend that even over using an entry-level program or app like Camtasia or using iMovie. I've used all those, and I would say YouTube's built-in technologies are just so seamless and easy to use. It's like, go to this section of the video, go to the 5-minute mark, and add this title. And I think it's a great opportunity to really use YouTube because it's just so easy to use. It's seamless in terms of what they've set up for you. So those are the different levels of working with all these audio and visual means, and hopefully you decide on your own which of these you want to use for your approaches and focus on your own comfort zone. I think the question of editing, because that is the last area here beyond video, is do you need titles? Do you need transitions? Even if it is within YouTube's very easy to use software. That's really a matter of opinion. I personally think A video should have a certain look to it in terms of professionalism. I like creating a video like this and having some intro and outro music. That's just my personal preference. Again, I do a lot of musical stuff in my own home studio, so it's part of my hobby as well. But I think if you can do some rudimentary level of basic titles and transitions, the quality of your video goes up, and for the student or viewer looking at this, they're going to appreciate that a little bit more. It's the time that you put into that technology. But again, really think about your own level of comfort and your time and your technological abilities and so forth. We can close out the video today with some odds and ends. One question is, do I invest in a camera? Again, I would say that's really up to you. Probably if you have a good quality cell phone that does some good audio and video, and you add on your lavalier mic or something like that, or a USB desk microphone as I showed you, those are pretty cheap. You don't have to break the bank. Lavalier mic, 20 bucks. Good desktop USB mic that maybe has a stand, you can get them as low as 20, 30 bucks. The one I showed you in the video is just around $100, but it gives me more flexibility. I can record audio for my voiceovers. I can do some of my acoustic instruments and wind instruments and do that as well. And it has some different microphone patterns I can select on the back of the microphone. So with a camera, I would say if you're planning to get into something, if you know you're taking some trips to Europe in the future and you want to have a little more good quality camera like the Osmo Pro that I was showing in this video, then that's going to do some stabilization for you. So guess what? You can use it for your class videos as well. You can invest in a tripod, and I showed you some of that with my previous focus on the cameras, and those are pretty cheap as well. A clip for your phone or your camera. So it's really up to you, but I think if you have an interest in developing this passion over time, then go for it. If you have a DSLR, if you have a nice Canon or Nikon or Panasonic camera, and you're already doing this for your still photography, guess what? That has built in really high level 1080p 4K media that you can already use. So I would recommend that if you're already shooting some great quality still photos, whether with a DSLR or an iPhone or a Samsung camera. If you do it, whatever that is, with your technology and your approaches to multimedia, be sure that it meets your needs. And don't do it if you hate it. Don't do it if you feel bogged down by the technology. If you want to learn a new technology and develop it, then it's a great opportunity, but it should be something fun for you, because if it's not fun, then I think it's going to come across as that with your students. How long should my recordings be? This is an area of dispute among some faculty. Some people feel like students will not sit through an hour lecture and that it's more the TED Talk level of, say, 10 to 15 minutes or something like this. I think it's okay to have longer lectures and to develop these. I think that it's an opportunity to really get your students to learn patience in terms of media, in terms of approaches, and it's an opportunity to really use the technology to teach things like patience and dedication to an academic discipline. That being said, I know some faculty would say the attention span of a student is short because the span of time that you see in a YouTube video is more and more smaller. An example of this I teach in visual anthropology is if you watch the old 1970s action films like, I'm dating myself here, Charles Bronson and Death Wish or Dirty Harry, and I grew up with some of these films as a young kid, maybe to my detriment. I wouldn't say those are all great films, but if you just watch one of the action sequences, there's one Dirty Harry film in particular that I remember. It begins with a long shot of Dirty Harry trying to talk down a guy who's going to jump off a building, and it's a very long shot that evolves over, I don't know, like 7 minutes or so. You see a lot of cutting back and forth, and it's just a really slow scene. Or some of the very first Star Trek film had a lot of long time shots of panning past the Enterprise. I think it was Bones and Kirk are looking at the new Enterprise that is coming out of dry dock. And the scenes go on a really, really, really long time. I actually appreciate some of that personally in terms of what it does visually. There is a scene in a Tarkovsky film, Stalker, the beginning scene in the apartment. It is such a slow scene. If you watch that, Google that, watch that scene. But it's amazing visually scene. It's captivating. It's really quite stellar in terms of what it's doing visually. I'm not saying we shouldn't have that kind of media, but more and more if you watch an action film today or even a dramatic film today, it could be very much shorter scenes, a lot of action sequences, very quick edits. And I think it's disappointing sometimes that filmmakers don't take advantage of some of those classic films of the past that were more focused on the visual approaches and had a more better appreciation of the patience of the audience and their value of seeing something slower and not as fast paced. So I know I'm getting off into a rabbit hole a little bit, but I love talking about this kind of conceptually and visually. So I think it's up to you, but maybe the theory out there is that your recording should tend to be a little shorter than longer, and I'll just leave it at that. So my recommendation is that you might want to start small in terms of some videos for your current class and add more over time as you get more advanced and more comfortable. So start with like 3 or 4 in your initial class, and then maybe next quarter when you teach it again, do another 3 or 4. Over time, you'll start to build out your Canvas shell. You will start to build out your YouTube site if you choose to have a YouTube site, and before you know it, each class will have 20, 30 videos. I recently sat down and did the OEI, the Online Educational Initiative pilot, and that is a very intensive program, let me tell you, if you choose to get involved in that. And I developed about 45, I think it was, videos for my Social 101 class, and it was a huge amount of time involved. I put these on YouTube, and then some of the folks doing the piloting or doing the judging of my work, we had some disagreement about this, but they were concerned about the captioning and not having the right punctuation. So I had to upload it through the 3C media program through the Chancellor's office. That was really time consuming, and there were some lags in the technology there. So let me tell you, if you develop a lot, as I did in that case, like 40 videos for one class, I really advise against that. I would never do that again, even though I'm an advanced video user. So start small, build it up, get your comfort level, and then you'll be surprised down the road you'll have more videos developing for your class. Consider that personal YouTube channel. I think it's really great for you. It establishes an opportunity for you to connect with your students, and who knows, if you have a hobby out there besides your teaching, you can include some videos for that as well, and you could use that as further personalization of your teaching for your students through YouTube. Rely on our faculty, community, and departments for help. If you are a math teacher and you want to connect with Wynn or Larry or the other math faculty who do a lot of videos in their classes, it's a great opportunity to make that connection and to see what works for them, and also to get into that important arena of content in your discipline. I haven't talked about content, of course, because obviously I don't teach all the disciplines that you teach in. So content needs to be handled through our department chairs, our faculty colleagues, and so forth. And as you build out some new videos in multimedia, touch base with those faculty, because they're going to know all the techniques specific to their disciplines, all the tricks and tools that they use in their classes. I want to say that more trainings on this topic will come as part of my faculty chair of teaching and learning role. We're going to roll out a lot of exciting stuff in fall, so this is not the first and only video on multimedia in your DE class, so be on the lookout for more of these trainings, including virtual trainings for those of you outside of the Lake Tahoe Basin unable to do it in person. And so I would just say good luck with you. I hope you have great opportunities out there in the future. Be creative. Again, start small. Don't get bogged down by the technology. In my new FCTL role, I would love to sit down with you in my office here, do some trainings, do some virtual Skyping and so forth, and really talk about using some technologies of multimedia for your Canvas DE class or your in-person class that really makes sense to you and will be meaningful for your students. Okay, so we went through some of the techniques here, looking at how to use multimedia, video, and audio approaches in your DE Canvas shell here at Lake Tahoe Community College. Again, as suggested throughout this video, I'm not trying to suggest you have to do a lot initially, but if you strive to create a couple of videos for your Canvas shell every quarter, you increase that number over time, you bring in lectures, you bring in short videos that are tip videos about conversations in your classes, or how to do discussions, or how to approach a particular problem set that you have in an assignment format and so forth. That's an opportunity to increase your engagement with your students in your classes. As I've suggested in this video today, you don't have to do a lot. You don't have to break the bank and buy a lot of equipment, but if you do a little bit and take some baby steps towards creating some good audio or video quality multimedia components in your classes, I really do believe that your students will benefit from that, what I'm calling today that increased presence and feedback and opportunity for conversation with your students in your DE classes. So good luck, and I'll be back with additional videos here about DE Canvas issues at Lake Tahoe Community College.